It was unexpectedly extended, so that's why it's called a ceasefire with Iran. Why is that? Well, if Trump calls for a ceasefire, that's one thing, but Iran doesn't stop. They launch a major offensive. Not only did they seize 2 international cargo ships, but they also threatened to cut off what's called the undersea fiber optic cables beneath the Persian Gulf. So what kind of impact would that have on the world? Why is Iran doing this? That's the main topic we're bringing you today. Also, yesterday, the Federal Reserve Chairman, well, the nominee for Federal Reserve Chairman, Kevin Warsh, went through a hearing with the Banking Committee. So what's really going on? I'll give everyone a detailed report on that today. Also, regarding Canada and the United States, the US, Mexico, and Canada, the 3 countries of North America, what used to be the North American Free Trade Agreement, well, the deadline is approaching. What kind of impact will that have on our friends in Canada? That's another topic we're bringing you today. All right, welcome to Good Morning America, brought to you by Fangway. Good morning and good evening to everyone tuning into our show. Hello to our friends watching on YouTube, and a warm greeting to all our listeners on Silicon Valley FM 96.1. Let's get started. First, let's talk about yesterday. Yesterday, Iran officially announced that it would not participate in the peace talks hosted by Pakistan. So what about the American delegation? Of course, they didn't go either, and Vance didn't go as well. Then that night, Trump suddenly made a move that really surprised everyone. Even though he kept saying that if the negotiations didn't happen, it would be impossible or very unlikely for the US to extend the ceasefire, but yesterday he suddenly announced that the ceasefire would be extended. So while extending the ceasefire, what exactly was said? Let me first talk about Iran's reaction. At the same time as the ceasefire extension was announced, Iran suddenly escalated the situation significantly, raising the level of conflict. How should I put it? Let's start with this. The UK, or rather the Operations Center, reported that an Iranian Revolutionary Guard gunboat opened fire on a container ship passing through the Strait of Hormuz, causing serious damage to its bridge. In addition, Iran's state-run media reported that on Wednesday, the Iranian military opened fire on 2 more commercial vessels in the Strait of Hormuz and detained them. At least one of these ships is Indian. So these are the 2 ships. One is called MSC Francisco, and the other is called Apamino Das. Anyway, these 2 ships were taken to Iran. At the same time, Iran also fired at a 3rd vessel in the strait, but did not detain it. This really sounds like the US detained 2 Iranian ships, so Iran detained 2 in return. This is what you call international cargo ships. That's the situation. So now, basically, let's talk about it now. What exactly is going on? Let's start with Trump announcing the postponement. Yesterday at 4 p.m., Trump tweeted that, given the serious divisions within the Iranian government, which he said was not surprising, and at the request of Pakistan's army chief, Munir, and Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, we have been asked to temporarily hold off on attacking Iran until Iran's leaders can present a unified response or coordinate among themselves, until they can come up with an agreed proposal. So because of this, I've instructed our military to continue maintaining the blockade and to stay on high alert and ready for combat in all other respects. Therefore, I have decided to extend the ceasefire agreement until Iran submits its proposal and completes the discussions, regardless of the outcome. So there were a lot of media outlets that are against Trump, saying that Trump chickened out. Then, an hour and a half later, at 5:30, the U.S. Treasury Secretary Benson tweeted that, as the president had made clear, the U.S. Navy would continue to enforce the blockade on Iranian ports. And in a few days, the oil storage tanks on Iran's Karg Island would be completely full. Iran's vulnerable oil wells would be forced to shut down. And restricting Iran's maritime trade directly targets the regime. Its main source of income would be threatened. He said the U.S. Treasury would continue to unleash what he called economic fury, apply maximum pressure, and systematically weaken the Iranian government's ability to obtain funds. Any individual or vessel that helps Iran acquire funds, whether through covert trade or financial means, will face U.S. sanctions. We will continue to freeze the corrupt assets of Iran. We will freeze the funds stolen by the Iranian leadership and protect these assets on behalf of the Iranian people. Wow, so this is really a major change. The first obvious question is, why did Trump decide to extend the ceasefire? This is actually pretty surprising because Trump kept saying it was unlikely, very unlikely, but in the end, he still extended it. So what's going on here? If you're asking me for an answer, honestly, I don't know. I think there are two possibilities. One is that Trump is just telling the truth in his tweets, just saying it like it is. He thinks Iran is about to respond, and he wants to wait for a rational response from Iran. So as his tweet said, he's temporarily extending the ceasefire. But if that's the case, then the extension will be very short. If nothing comes back within a day or two, or maybe 2 or 3 days, then Trump will go back to what he originally said, ending the ceasefire and restarting the conflict. So some relevant US officials have revealed that as soon as there are signs that Iran is willing to return to the negotiating table, they will immediately arrange for talks. That's the plan. The second possibility is that Trump thinks the siege is enough and there's no need for bombing. A siege is more effective and cheaper. Which one will it be? We don't know yet. Honestly, I really don't know. We'll have to wait a couple of days to find out. But no matter what, regardless of which option it is, the fact that the Treasury Department acted, Trump spoke for an hour and a half, and then an hour and a half later, Mnuchin sent out that tweet, was definitely not a coincidence. After Trump made his decision, he had Mnuchin ramp up the pressure, and then Mnuchin sent out that tweet. After that, Trump tweeted again this morning, saying that Iran is heading toward financial collapse. They're desperate to reopen the Strait of Hormuz right away because they're extremely short on cash, losing $500 million every day. Even the military and police are complaining that they can't get paid, and now they're sending out an SOS. So let me share my thoughts. I really think Trump definitely has a softer side to him. Because of his compassion, he doesn't want to target civilian infrastructure. He believes that by using blockades and sieges, he can put enough pressure on the other side to make them back down. Actually, if you've been following posts on X, people from northern cities in Iran have been tweeting about this. Ordinary people are out jogging, working out, shopping, everything is normal. It's as if this war hasn't affected regular folks at all. All the strikes have been aimed solely at the Iranian regime's military targets. Alright, so since Trump is calling for a ceasefire, wouldn't Iran be happy to agree to it, right? But Iran isn't stopping. As you saw earlier, they attacked 3 ships in a row and then seized 2 more. So what's really going on here? I already explained part of the reason to everyone yesterday. Right now, there's been a shift inside Iran. The hardline faction, known as the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, has clearly seized power and cut off contact between the Iranian president and the supreme leader, Khamenei. So who is the Iranian president? His name is Pezeshkian. The recent conflict stems from one thing. He's been trying to appoint a new minister of intelligence since the previous national intelligence chief was taken out. So he picked someone new. Normally, after he makes this kind of decision, it would go to Khamenei for approval, but now it's Khamenei who has to approve it. Iran's president is like China's premier, needing approval from the general secretary for appointments. The supreme leader is like the general secretary, and the religious system mirrors the party. In truth, the CCP is essentially a cult as well. So these two countries really are quite comparable. In my view, it's like everything has to go to the general secretary for approval. But now, the general secretary's succession is kind of illegitimate. We all know that for the general secretary to take power, for Khamenei to pass it on to his successor, he has to get approval from something called the Assembly of Experts. But honestly, it's very likely that when they were meeting, the Assembly of Experts was wiped out in one go by Israel. So what happened in the end? That's the first question. The second question is about passing power from father to son, hereditary succession. This kind of practice, where the son inherits the father's position, is actually strongly opposed within Iran's Shia religious circles. Even Khamenei himself was against it. But in the end, things still turned out this way. So there's a strong possibility that it's actually because Khamenei is very close to the Revolutionary Guard, and the Revolutionary Guard broke the rules and pushed him into power. And as for the person they pushed into power, he still hasn't shown his real face even once to this day. So it's very likely that he's in a paralyzed state, or unconscious, or in a long-term coma, whatever the case may be. He's just in a state where he can't make a public appearance. In this situation, it's simple, and much like the CCP, Iran is very similar. Political power grows out of the barrel of a gun. So Revolutionary Guard Commander Vahidi, who I introduced yesterday, just stepped in and seized power. As a result, he immediately scrapped the president's nominated candidate. This nominee was actually the former Minister of Defense, obviously a very qualified person, but he was vetoed. And what was the reason? He said that under wartime conditions, all key and sensitive positions must be held by us. It has to be directly selected and managed by us, the Revolutionary Guard. Now, as I mentioned before, the Revolutionary Guard was established during the 1979 Iranian Revolution. Its main purpose at the time was to maintain the theocratic regime. They first suppressed internal dissent in domestic issues. Later, they began exporting the revolution, but that came afterward. Basically, the Revolutionary Guard became its own system, effectively a state within a state. Just like how the Communist Party operates within the Chinese government, it's a government within a government. Its reach extends down to every level, even village committees. That's why the Nine Commentaries describes the party as being in a parasitic state. It's like this parasitic presence attached to the country's system. It's a really vivid description. So yeah, that's exactly what the Revolutionary Guard is, a government within a government. Their military is even called the Party Guard. To put it plainly, let's just call them the Party Guard. So now it's basically the Party Guard that's in power. The hardliners are in charge. There's a Saudi analyst named al-Makhouli who even said that a coup has already taken place inside Iran, and the Revolutionary Guard has already sidelined the Speaker of Parliament, Ghalibaf. The ones who led the negotiations in Pakistan, along with President Pezeshkian and Foreign Minister Arachi, have all been placed under house arrest, and negotiations with the United States have already been cut off. Naturally, this is impossible to verify, much like the CCP, where transparency is also lacking. But over time, some observers really do have a keen eye for these things. If that's the case, what can Trump expect if he waits a day or two? I don't think he'll get anything out of it, right? That's the issue here. Alright, so first, there's the change in personnel. Second, it's about what the new people are thinking. So these people, like the one who just took over, Vahidi, he's an extremely fanatical religious extremist. So his belief is basically in doomsday ideology. What does that mean? It means that if he dies in battle or sacrifices himself for his religious fanaticism, he believes he can go to heaven. He's not afraid of death. That's the situation. So in the past 2 days, not only does what the president says not count, and any promised negotiations don't happen, but the Iranian Revolutionary Guard even unveiled a new medium-range missile called the Khorramshahr 4. It drove the ballistic missile straight into Tehran's Revolution Square for the public to see. So basically, it's like putting this military intimidation against the US, or you could call it military posturing, right out on the streets, letting everyone witness the trend of power shifts within Iran. That missile we just saw has a range of up to 2,000 kilometers and can carry a heavy warhead. It was specifically designed to target Israel, made especially to strike Israel. So at the same time, in 2 other squares, one called Vanik Square and the other Revolution Square, they deployed at least 2 sets of ballistic missiles and launch systems at each location. As you know, these missiles and launch systems are exactly what the US and Israel have been relentlessly targeting. Now, during the ceasefire, they've actually rolled them out onto the streets as a show of force. The message is very clear. It's basically saying, I'm not afraid of you. So basically, Iran is just playing hardball, plain and simple. So, of course, playing it this way has actually led to the worst possible outcome. Because when the hardliners and the so-called moderates are struggling for power, like I've told you before, it's just like within the Chinese Communist Party. You can figure it out with a little thought. The hardliners are bound to win because they're even more revolutionary. They're even more politically correct, so this outcome was inevitable. But as the saying goes, fortune and misfortune depend on each other. If things keep going like this, it could eventually lead to the total collapse of the Iranian regime. Up until now, Trump hasn't wanted to completely destroy the Iranian regime, but if this continues, that could very well happen. Yeah, right. So about this, how should I put it? Let me share my thoughts. President Trump, I think he's very sharp. He's smart, and he's also compassionate. But I think he has a blind spot. He might not really understand what true evil is or what goes on in a dictator's mind. Just think about it. He believes that Iran is short 500 million US dollars every day. In just 1 month, that's a shortage of 13 billion. Where is he going to find 13 billion? He thinks that if he runs out of money, in the end, he'll collapse and have to surrender. Trump's idea is that anyone in that situation would surrender. But the problem is, Iran can survive even with just a little bit of scraps left as their trump card. Just like how in North Korea, even if the whole population starves, the regime still survives. And it doesn't stop the supreme leader from being this chubby guy, right? Kim Jong-un is always well-fed and plump. He goes in with high blood pressure because he eats so well. So what about the others? The Revolutionary Guard has had their own secret stash for a long time. They've been hiding it away. Honestly, I think Trump is projecting a bit here because he cares about the interests of the country. He thinks that if you're the leader of a country and things get this bad, wouldn't you come to the table to negotiate? But the thing is, they don't actually care about the country's interests at all. What they care about is the survival of their own regime. And the biggest threat to the regime's survival comes from the ordinary people below. So the regime has to be tough in order to survive. Only by being tough can they keep things under control and scare the people into submission. So between being hawkish and making compromises, the former is politically correct for them. Plus, with their religious fanaticism, I don't think Trump will ever get the negotiations he's hoping for. That's just my personal opinion. So when Trump talks to them now, honestly, I feel like it's just talking past each other. Today, Trump even tweeted again, saying that negotiations might resume soon. If they do resume, the earliest could be this Friday. Let's just wait and see what actually happens. Meanwhile, Pakistan, acting as a mediator, is really working hard, doing everything it can to push for a new round of talks within the next 36 to 72 hours. So this is what's happening right now. So what will happen next? I don't know. Let's wait and see. This is my analysis, just sharing it with everyone. Let's see if my analysis turns out to be right. I think Trump has a blind spot in this area, but he's a very quick learner, and he picks things up fast. I think that during this stalling process, he'll come to understand what his opponent's bottom line is, what they're really thinking. There's this news agency called Tasnim News Agency. What is it? It's a media outlet, a news agency controlled by Iran's Revolutionary Guard. They issued a warning on behalf of the Iranian regime, saying that Iran might cut the undersea network cables in the Persian Gulf. And what do cables for cloud infrastructure mean? There are dozens of major undersea fiber optic cables running beneath the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. At least 17 systems run under the sea there. What do they include? They include AAE-1, Falcon, Gulf Bridge International, EPEG, and so on. There are a whole bunch of them. I won't list them all one by one, I'll just give two examples. What is AAE-1? What does AAE stand for? It stands for Asia, Africa, Europe 1. This is a transcontinental undersea fiber optic cable system. Asia, Africa, and Europe. It's an undersea network superhighway that connects Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and Europe. The total length is 25,000 kilometers, spanning multiple key nodes. Basically, it runs all the way from Asia to Europe. This route goes through the Middle East to Europe, and it was completed and put into use in 2017. If it gets damaged, it immediately affects global internet speeds, which can cause delays in financial markets and international communications. Of course, the main impact is on Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. So who built it? China Telecom, China Unicom, and also a company from the UAE called... Yes, it's also a telecom company from the UAE, as well as telecom companies from Italy and France's Orange Telecom Company. The data traffic in the Persian Gulf region accounts for 17% to 30% of the world's total, depending on the time. As for this so-called Asia, Middle East, Europe corridor, its data traffic makes up 95%. So if it gets cut off, communication between Asia and Europe would basically be severed. This is another tactic similar to an oil embargo. It's a way to threaten the whole world. Now pay attention to this Falcon cable, also known as the Yinxing Laoyin or the Laoyin network. This is an optical cable in the Middle East region, and it's a ring-shaped cable running under the Persian Gulf. It supports network services and cloud computing for what's called the 7, or actually 8, Middle Eastern countries. We all know that Amazon, Microsoft, and Google have many data centers in the Persian Gulf. As these Gulf countries are transforming their economies away from oil, they don't want to rely on oil extraction forever. They need to truly build themselves up. One of the most important industries is cloud computing and AI, among other areas. So in this regard, there's a heavy reliance on these networks. In short, when Iran says it wants to cut these cables, what does that mean? This is really a case of hurting others without benefiting yourself. So this is entirely a direct attack on civilian infrastructure. It's a classic example. Listen to me, everyone. I just described two main fiber optic cables. This really doesn't have much to do with the United States. The main impact is on communications between China, Europe, and the Gulf countries. So this is a typical example of Iran's approach. Like when Zhang San hits me, I go and hit Lisi instead. The US attacks him, but he can't strike back at the US directly, so he goes after Lee Sin instead. Basically, it's using terrorist attacks on civilian infrastructure to increase the political cost for Trump. This is the same tactic, trying to push you back using this method. It's similar to the strategy of blockading the Strait of Hormuz. So what will be the outcome in the future? Everyone will see for themselves. It's like teaching the international community to understand what kind of player Iran really is, whether it's a terrorist organization or not. If such a terrorist regime were to get its hands on a nuclear bomb, he can blockade oil, he can cut undersea cables, he can use drones and missiles to attack countries that have absolutely nothing to do with him, countries that never provoked him at all. So if he had a nuclear bomb, do you really think he wouldn't use it? Oh, do you think he would say, I'm a responsible nuclear power, so I won't attack you? So this is also for the world to see what's really going on. I have a news editor who told me something this morning. He commented that it feels like he's got a death wish, doesn't it? Yeah, right, you could put it that way. But mainly, it's definitely not about wanting to die. What they're really after is political correctness through being tough. There's an old Chinese saying, if heaven brings disaster, you can still survive. If you bring disaster on yourself, there's no way out. That's basically Iran's current approach. So if the hardliners really take power and keep being tough like this, in the end, they're just bringing about their own downfall. That's how I see it going forward. So what do you think? This situation really is the Middle East crisis playing out on a global stage. All right, let's take a look. Looking at American politics, actually, the situation in the Middle East has a big impact on US politics. A lot of people are really worried about it, including Professor Victor Hansen. He is very concerned. He thinks there are only 7 months left until the midterm elections. If Middle East conflicts persist, US oil will suffer. In New York, gas is $3.80 a gallon. If it drops to $2.40 by the election, Trump wins the midterms. Yeah, right now in California, gas prices are up to $6 or $7 a gallon. So the pressure this puts on US domestic politics, could it force Trump to back down? That's the strategy from Iran, from the Iranian hardliners. That's what they're thinking. To be honest, let me just share my personal opinion here. This is just my own commentary. I think Trump is much less worried about these political consequences than most people would expect. He just doesn't worry about it that much. What he cares about are the things that are important for the country, and he really doesn't care, or maybe doesn't even care at all about other things. For example, he's not that concerned about how the midterm elections go. It's not that he doesn't care at all, but he's just not a traditional politician. So that's my view. Anyway, regardless, all of this is constantly changing. As for Trump, he himself said that attacking Iran was like taking a detour. He went off and did something else. Meanwhile, his opponents have always said that he was being led by Netanyahu, that he fought this war because Netanyahu was pulling the strings. Trump himself, well, not in person, but in his tweets, said that wasn't the case. But there are two things here. First, on October 7th, one thing is Trump's consistent view of Iran, that this regime is evil and needs to be dealt with, needs to be taught a lesson. Second, the terrorist attack launched against Israel on October 7th, that was Hamas, but behind it was Iran. It wasn't just Hamas acting, it was Iran pulling the strings, because Hamas is basically just an extension of Iran. These two things, his consistent view of Iran and the attack on October 7th, 2023, made him determined. He said he didn't need Netanyahu to give him any advice. So this is the action taken to address the long-term threats faced by the US, Israel, or Western civilization as a whole. He believes it's worth it. All right, next, let's talk about something. Trump posted a tweet today, which is pretty interesting. It was about a Democratic strategist named James Carville. James Carville is actually quite old now, but he used to be very famous. He was the one who helped Clinton. What was it that he won again? He won the 1992 election. Clinton did at that time. He turned things around and beat the elder Bush, getting him out of office. When Clinton became president, Carville was the main strategist behind the scenes. At that time, he said something really important. It's the economy, stupid. Basically, it's all about the money. It's all about the economy. When it comes down to elections, it's just about the economy. That's all it is. So he was really famous back then. But now, well, more recently, he's been making a lot of high-profile statements, really outspoken. And just recently, right after he spoke out, he got himself into trouble. All right, before I talk about the trouble he got into, let me first mention the American Rescue Plan. A lot of viewers have been asking about the American Rescue Plan. What's going on with it now? Is there any progress or not? The reason is because of the Senate Majority Leader. John Thune believes that doing this, meaning forcing it through or getting rid of the filibuster, is politically incorrect, or you could say politically unethical. If you want to push it through without abolishing the filibuster, using the method of prolonged speeches, it would require a tough battle, possibly a months-long fight. The most important thing is whether the leader is willing to command and lead the charge. But if the leader doesn't want to fight, then of course it won't happen. That's basically what we're seeing right now. There's just no will to fight. So he's just paying lip service. He's not actually doing anything. That's why, in reality, there's been no progress at all. Now, knowing this, he's actually taking a different stance. James Carville, on a left-wing podcast called Politics War Room, though the original War Room was started by Steve Bannon, by the way. Now, the left has also set up their own version of a war room. On that show, he spoke out. He's known for being really outspoken, and he said that if the Democrats win the 2028 presidential election and also take both the House and the Senate, they should take the following actions. First, immediately split Washington, D.C. into 2 new states, which would add 4 Democratic seats in the Senate. Then, second, expand the number of Supreme Court justices from 9 to 13 so that they can take control of the Supreme Court. He also said that if the Democrats win both chambers, he thinks this is exactly what they should do one day. He even started cursing, saying things like, "F it," and telling them to eat our dirt, eat our dust. But then he added something interesting. He said, "Don't talk about this during the campaign. Don't mention it. Just go ahead and do it directly." He thinks this is the necessary tactic for the Democrats to turn things around, and that it can be done unilaterally. Is that really the case? Well, if one party controls both Congress and the presidency, then in theory, any state could just be added at will. They can do it however they want, as long as both chambers and the president agree. That's the situation the Republicans are in right now. They have control, but, well, they can't even reach consensus on the filibuster. So within the Republican Party, everyone has their own opinions. As for what the Democrats are like, we'll talk about that in a bit. But even though he made that statement and people told him this is something you can do but shouldn't talk about, he still went ahead and said it, didn't he? And as soon as someone dug it up, it was immediately picked up and widely reported by Fox, National Review, and the Wall Street Journal, sparking a strong backlash. So it turned into this situation. James Carville, he really was quite formidable back in the day, very experienced, and he's pretty old now. I don't know exactly how old he is, maybe even 80 by now. But the thing is, he just can't keep his mouth shut, and later on, what he said often turned out to be unreliable. He made a lot of mistakes. Before 2024, he made a ton of predictions and gave all sorts of advice, but almost none of them were accurate. So now when this guy talks, he's really not any kind of reliable strategist anymore. He's just someone who can't control what he says. And today, Trump tweeted about it. He said, "That crazy James Carville, a so-called Democratic strategist." Since he wants the Democrats to turn Washington, D.C. into a state and strip away its current status, what's even more important to him is packing the Supreme Court. If they succeed in turning these 2 places into states, then these people who are destroying the country will dominate American politics for 100 years, if we even still have a country left by then. They also want to get rid of the filibuster. But Trump said they've already done a great job with the Supreme Court. The justices appointed by the Democrats stick together like glue. They're absolutely loyal to the people who put them in power, forming an unshakable force. Nothing can change them. What he means is they don't rule based on the law, but only on ideology. Trump said, "Honestly, I really respect that." Trump actually has a lot of respect for his opponents, and he's not just pretending. You know what kind of person truly respects their opponents? What kind of person do you think can respect their opponents and actually say it out loud? Only a truly strong person can do that. They can say that.